Rezone petition. It's a public hearing to consider rezone petition number 1434, a petition by Carolyn Brown, Director of Parks and Recreation, to rezone approximately 44 acres located west of Knights Trail Road and north of Rustic Road from OUR Open Use Rural, OUC Open Use Conservation, and GU Government Use to Government Use Zone District.
On your screen, the subject property is shown here in green and is primarily zoned government use. That portion of the site along Cowpen Slough is zoned OUC, Open Use Conservation, and a small area to the west is zoned OUR, or Open Use Rural. This is the future land use plan map, which shows the subject property cross-hatched in black. The site is primarily designated major government uses, and that portion of it along Cowpen Slough is designated public conservation preservation. A small portion to the east is designated rural. The land use designations also correspond to the zoning designations on the maps. This is the development concept plan. The site is outlined in red. And to the south, again, you can see the existing trap and skeet facility. And to the southwest is the county's gun range.
I'm just curious. The existing shooting range, not the area where the current clay activities take place, but the existing shooting range, that's where rifles are shot and pistols and that sort of thing, I'm assuming?
That's correct.
Okay.
And you also have the sheriffs and other law enforcement that have their separate range and activities where they do firearms training for our law enforcement officials.
Okay. This may seem like a dumb question, but do you want to be downrange from that kind of activity? I understand the shot can only go so far, but when you're dealing with rifles and so forth, do you want to be in this proposed area?
We actually work closely with staff to limit the impacts. And let me just show you on the graphic here. You'll see down in the lower right-hand corner, these are the existing pistol, and then the little area in here, these are actually baffling for the sheriff's range. So the way the shot falls, it doesn't fall into an area that will have an impact. In addition, the county has proposed to add baffling to these two components of the range in the future. Before we're able to use any of this area, the baffling will need to be installed so that we don't have any safety issues. So effectively, let me see if I can draw a line here. If you draw a line through this area, I think I actually have, there we go. This area of the proposed site falls within a potential safety area of concern that would not be able to be used until the baffling would be installed. And I apologize for the crudeness of the graphic.
I'm specifically looking at the far left-hand side of that existing range, which has a longer, I'm assuming that's where rifles are shot.
This area in here?
Now, back down at the existing shooting range, right there,
right
where
here?
your pointer is.
Yep. It actually comes out at an angle, and I'm sorry, I'm not real good at.
Well, I'm looking at the angle of that, and that seems to be more to the left of this proposed area than the right. I understand it is pointed in that general direction, but I'm just concerned about a potential safety problem, and I understand baffles and everything else, but there's always that instance where a rifle could go off in the wrong direction and go up that way or go above where the baffles would be. And I would be concerned about being someone on that property in that area. Now, the likelihood of that happening is probably not great, but it is possible.
And I do know that the county did work with the FWC experts who are operating that course on behalf of the county. They brought in an expert at design, and he has specifically recommended the baffling so that you don't have that concern. And that's one of the reasons, if you'll see in your package, there's a copy of the lease that effectively says we can't use this portion as the club until the baffling is installed, so that becomes a non-issue moving forward.
Okay. I think I've made my point, but I understand where you're coming from. Any other questions of staff?
started, even if you don't have all the packets. My name's John Miller. I signed a card. I've given you this packet. At the bottom of the cover page, it summarizes my concerns about this proposal. There's a lot of material here. I would hope you would review it. I regret that I couldn't get it to you sooner. But as you'll see on the second page, part of the problem has been that the county has failed to let the public know that what is called the subject property is actually part of the Pinelands Reserve. So they sent out hundreds of notices to people in the county and owning property nearby, but failed to mention the fact that it was part of the Pinelands Reserve. There are a number of comprehensive plan elements that I believe would suggest that this is not appropriate. As previous speakers have mentioned, there is a 200-acre gopher tortoise mitigation area to the west of this site. Your planning staff was unaware of the existence of this facility. In their comments, they referred to it as property surrounded by vacant wooded parcels. Well, this is the mitigation area for Palmer Ranch, and the dream of having continuous recreational trails and habitat from Oscar Shearer over to the Mayaca River and eventually to the Peace River. That's not a dead dream. I spoke with people coincidentally today that are still working on trying to make that happen. So it would be ironic if the county took an action that, figuratively at least, shot itself in the foot in terms of making this connectivity between protected lands to the west and the east. And as you see at the top of that page, the county does have an obligation to identify, manage, and protect all ecological communities, habitat corridors, and wildlife. Next page.
Commissioner Bishop.
I'm going to support the rezone. I understand Jono's concerns about lead shot. Very toxic, and it has to be a big concern. I do know that the gun range does do the recycling. If it prohibits from going down the water table, boy, I don't know. I'm not sure. But it's government use property. There's a dump there. We need a dump, and I believe we need a gun range, and I believe this is the proper location.
Commissioner Kellogg.
I'm ready to do a motion. Based upon the evidence and testimony received at the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of rezone petition number 14-34 in accordance with the staff report and recommendation and with favorable findings of fact.
Motion. Is there a second? Commissioner Bishop seconds the motion. Commissioner Kellogg, to your motion.
We are very fortunate to have a facility like this, and I'm thrilled to be the person that would like to move this forward. I've spent my fair share time down there, and they are unbelievable stewards. I'm sure they have best in class in how they operate that facility. I've watched them take groups of young men, and they'll get them to actually on their own clean up after themselves. Now, how many can do that? How many you have 15-year-olds that actually clean their own room, much less get them down there, grab a magnet, and start cleaning up all the shells? So I have no doubt whatsoever that they will treat this expansion just like they treat the present facility, and we are very fortunate to have it. So I'm happy to move forward.
Thank you. Commissioner Bishop, to your motion.
Nothing forward.
I happen to think that this is an appropriate application. Really, you can't think of a better place to have it than next to the existing one that's already there. And I congratulate the club on its success in being able to draw more people to our area and give us economic development. So with that, Commissioner Burris.
Thank you. I do also support the idea of the gun range in general and this trap and skeet activity that's going on. Not a shotgun type shooter, but I'm a rifle type and handgun type shooter going back for days of Air Force. That said, I have concerns, and had I thought there was support for a second, I probably would have made a motion to deny. But having been in that situation recently, I said, no, we'll just go along with it, and I'll speak. I'm not so sure that this is the proper place for the expansion. If some of Commissioner Morris's concerns, notwithstanding the fact of ballistic trajectories and so forth coming from the rifle range, the ones that are going to be downrange, the rifle range, are comfortable being there. And to me, that speaks volumes. If they're willing to be there, that's fine. Nonetheless, I think we as a board, the county commission as a board, has a responsibility, and yes, we're hearing good testimony that blah, 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 blah. But I'm not so sure that putting a public activity downrange of a rifle range is good public policy, period, and have a concern about that. Most of you know me and know I'm environmentally sensitive. Very few people would call me an environmentalist. That said, I have definite concerns about the frequency with which an excellent organization like the club actually reclaims the lead. What I heard was testimony was that they do it when it's economically feasible. They test, and when it's economically feasible, they do it. I would rather have heard they test periodically, and when it gets to a certain level of contamination, then they would do it, and rather than when it makes sense economically. That said, I think they're good people, and I think they'll take good care of the property, and I'm delighted to support the idea of this, but I just am of the opinion that this is not exactly the best place for this, and for that reason I will not support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ask?
Thank you. I am going to support the motion. I think it's an appropriate location for this form of recreation. I think farther out east, a lot of times they say, where's a better place? And they'll say out east somewhere. Well, that's not as convenient for users, more miles on the road, and we know that's not environmentally friendly or economically friendly. I do think, it appears to me, these are very responsible people managing the facility, and I have faith in them. As far as the safety issue goes, I have shot at the sheriff's range there, and there is a very tall berm behind there, and I can't conceive of shooting over that berm and coming down. That'd be a slam dunk to go up and come down, and I can't conceive that as an issue. Lastly, I'd like to close by saying I think this is a terrific amenity for our community, and I think our Councilman Gates put it very adroitly when she said, you know, it's an economic development issue, it's good for our residents, it's good for our tourists, and I think we should be proud that we've got a good organization working hand in hand with the county going forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Commissioner Richardson?
Having shot sporting clays out there before, I think this is a excellent place, and the safety and helpfulness of the organization running it is phenomenal, and I'm going to support it.
Thank you. Seeing no further requests, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries 6-1.
The applicant is proposing to rezone 1.015 acres of a fill area in Shackett Creek from OUC, which is open use conservation, 1 unit per 25 acres, to RSF1. I'm going to get to where that zoning is in a minute. That's what they're proposing is to, you can see on the left, that's the existing zoning. What they want to do is take that area that's outlined in blue here and make it yellow, zone it to RSF1. That consists of 1.015 acres. And then what they're doing and what they're terming a swap, rezone swap, I'm reluctant to use that term, is to rezone approximately 1.43 acres, which is currently zoned RSF1 to OUC, and not build on that portion of the property. That's in summary, what they're trying to do is take two areas and literally swap the zoning, move the zoning to where they want to build a single-family residence. What you're looking at is currently vacant property that's much of which is affected by Shackett Creek, as you can see. The water's literally there, and much of this is wetlands. The applicant's proposing to develop one single-family residence on, actually, let me go back here a minute and say that the future land use of the property is moderate density residential, which is shown by the yellow color, and the two parcels that are the subject of this rezone are highlighted with the shading on them. And as you can see, everything in that area is designated moderate density residential, which is defined as greater than or equal to 2 to less than 5 units per acre on the future land use map. Much of or if not all of the area to be rezoned to OUC is wetlands. There is a lot of wetlands up in this area, but there are some highlands too, some upland. This is a non-binding development concept plan because it's simply a rezone to RSF1 or into OUC, and those neither require a binding plan. There will be a triangular-shaped piece of property left at the corner, much of which is impacted by wetlands, but there is some highlands or uplands there. And that area in the northeast corner is 29,088 square feet, which is 0.667 acres, 2/3 of an acre. And that will remain. And yes, that's big enough to build a single-family residence on in that portion of the property, because I know that's a question you'd ask. Access to the RSF1 zone property that they're proposing will be by a driveway from Albee Farm Road. The proposed driveway will cross portions of Shackett Creek. I know you're going to hear about that, and will require a WNCA permit for development of that driveway. No access is all proposed to Laurel Road from this, but again, it's a non-binding plan, and again, that portion of the triangle in the northeast corner is a developable piece that could meet one single-family residence size in the RSF1 zoning district, so they could build up there if they wanted to. We have no recommended stipulations from any of the reviewing agencies.
My name is John Coda, and I have filled out a speaker's card. As was noted, I was with the Boone firm for 25 years, and this is my first opportunity to be in front of you all, so thank you. Here representing the applicants. My role this evening is just to take a few minutes and do a few things prior to getting into the nuts and bolts with the environmental specialist, Mr. Browse. I'm going to do a short bullet cap recap of the application as it stands, as we see it. We'll do a brief history of the land. You already discussed that to a certain extent. And third, we're going to preempt and address a few what we think are misstatements and misapprehensions contained within the infamous Stop the Swap petition that's being circulated. You ready? Okay, slide one. As for the property itself, we know that the Commission and the planners don't like to use the word swap, although I've heard it mentioned a few times already. But I understand why, but in this case, I think there's an argument that the term is inapplicable anyway, because our clients really aren't seeking to swap equal land for equal land. As I see it, their proposal actually provides a means by which the county will receive a greater level of benefits and protections for environmentally sensitive property than would be the case if the application had not been submitted at all. And I think that's something that Mr. Browse is going to touch on in a little bit regarding the planner's conclusions for this proposal. So I'm going to belabor a little bit of what's already been discussed. What our clients propose is to have a 1.43 acre parcel here, which is most of which is designated wetlands, rezoned from more intensive RSF1 to less intensive OUC. They would also have another smaller parcel of upland property of just over 1 acre, rezoned from OUC to RSF1. If we're going to call this a swap, then it benefits the county and the environment, in our opinion, because it means that almost 1.5 acres of designated wetlands, or whatever the amount might be, it's significant. It will now be zoned OUC, while a much smaller parcel of approximately 1 acre will be zoned RSF1. And this area that we're seeking to have rezoned is upland. And again, only one single family home is going to be constructed on that entire acre. So let's go back in time a bit. This is a 1957 aerial photo showing that before the improvements to Laurel Road and before the Prinebrook Road, before the Albee Farm Road was extended to meet it, there was a graded access path accessible from the southeast. All that area in white that you're seeing the cursor go across now was upland. Next slide. In 1974, by 1974, you can see that a portion of that southern boundary of the property was no longer graded with access to the consistently dry upland area, which is the area my clients would like rezoned. Access at that point was achieved from the north off of Laurel Road. And then again, we talked about this a little bit. By 1988, things had changed rather drastically because Laurel Road was improved with stormwater features, including a drainage easement at that time. So the effect of that, we think, was to essentially inundate the area formerly used for access, which cut off access from Laurel Road. Again, however, the area our clients seek to rezone to RSF1 was and is upland. Our clients researched the history of the parcels and discovered that back in 2006, a former prospective purchaser of the southern parcel submitted a site plan utilizing existing zoning classifications. So the home site that was proposed at that time within the wetlands area and the long dock had a long dock going out to Shackett Creek. Our client's proposal is on the right, and the next few slides will show you the difference between the two of them. The next one here, this is the 2006 proposal, whopping 28,717 square feet of impact to wetlands. In contrast, our client's proposal impacts less than 5,000 square feet of wetland, and most of that is near the entrance there off of Pine Brook where the driveway begins. And the last slide regarding that previous feature, it just shows a bar graph showing the difference of wetland impacted lands between those two proposals.
That the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Florida Department of Environmental Protection have looked at this and have signed off on it and are issuing a permit. And then from the words from the staff report that was made, the Sarasota County staff report, the proposal for rezoning is to take the disturbed upland portions of the parcel and designate them as RSF 1 districts and to place the mangrove swamp and tidal marsh habitats in the OUC district. This reduces the overall size of the RSF district. And then this approach provides better environmental outcome.
You all have mentioned this is just for one house. Is there do you have a stipulation, or would you be willing to make a stipulation that if this does go through, that you're just going to build a single-family house on the property?
I don't think that that they're willing to make that stipulation right now.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to know the answer.
Yeah.
So I read somewhere that perhaps a bridge was contemplated for the driveway access. Was that ever, or is it always a culvert?
During the discussions with U.S. Corps of Army Engineers, several options were explored. And finally, it was determined that the best option would be a culvert. So at that time, the option of a bridge was explored, but it was never determined to be such.
Okay. And as far as the permitting process, have you gotten any permits from the Army Corps? I know that there's been some documentation submitted, but is there an actual Army Corps permit on this?
Yes, yes. In order to have their involvement and to make sure that everything was being done as it should be, we were in contact with them very early on and went ahead and completed that process.
And DEP as well?
And DEP as well, yes.
Okay. I have a question for staff, unless someone else wants to, on another topic.
You're finished.
Okay. Zoning. I have a zoning question. Hi, Donna.
Hi.
Is there a precedent for a rezone from OUC to anything else, or in particular RSF, an RSF district or RMF district, anything like that? Has that ever occurred?
Not that I'm aware of. And for the record, Donna Thompson was zoning, and I have signed a speaker's card.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any such rezone, no.
Okay. I'm looking at Municode as far as how OUC is defined, but could you just, I don't want to give the testimony, so you tell me what OUC is, what the intent of it is, if you don't mind.
So the OUC district is intended to retain the open character of land. The district is further intended to preserve and protect native habitats, wilderness areas, marshlands, watersheds, water recharge areas, open spaces, parklands unless otherwise zoned GU, scenic areas, historical and archaeological resources, and beaches. It's used to establish wildlife and open space corridors as buffer areas to lands designated public resource lands on the future land use map, to protect life and property in areas subject to flooding, and to conserve fish and wildlife. The permitted uses are restricted to conservation and, with certain limitations, recreation and other uses that are not contrary to the open character of the district.
Okay, thank you. And do you know how long this has been zoned OUC, this property? No?
I would say at least since the 2003 code went into effect. I haven't looked
So
at the
for a while.
previous, yes.
Okay, and this was the zoning that was in place when the property was acquired?
Commissioner Mast.
You want to discuss? Commissioner Morris.
I will
Commissioner
place
Morris.
myself on the petard before you make a motion. To me, this, and the questions that I asked zoning about OUC and what that means, and is there precedent for switching from OUC? There's been plenty of OUR that we've rezoned here, which makes perfect sense, but OUC being conservation makes me look at it in a little bit different light. And this, to me, does not seem like a good deal for Sarasota County. We are being asked to take what could be considered environmentally sensitive land, even though it is technically upland, it's sort of upland, and swap it for something that's zoned RSF1 that is currently wetland, for the most part. And yes, you could mitigate all kinds of things on that RSF1. In fact, you could probably even take some of some other mitigated property and make it upland and transform that RSF. But there's plenty of RSF1 wetland property that will never be built on, and for good reason. So to me, I know that nobody likes to use the word swap, but that's what they're asking for. And this is not a good trade for the community. It's not a good trade for Sarasota County. You've got it, in order for me to support an application that asks someone to go from OUC to RSF, and the fact that the applicant has come before us and has given us drawings that says we're going to put one house, single-family house on there, but they're absolutely not willing to stipulate that. It's just not a good deal for me. So I don't know where everybody else comes out on it, but I'm not for this application. Sorry.
Thank you, Commissioner Morris. Any further discussion warranted before Commissioner Mast proceeds to a motion? Of course, upon which we can continue discussion. Okay, Commissioner Mast.
Based upon the evidence and testimony received in the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission recommend denial of rezone petition number 1904 with the following findings and facts.
Those being?
Yeah,
I had that happen once too.
Multiple points. I have lived in this community since I was young, very, very young. As long as I can remember, and I've been in building and construction my entire adult life, I cannot recall at all ever having a swap like this before where there was OUC switched or any other sensitive lands, in this case that I can recall. I think that this applicant knowingly purchased the property in its current state, and I totally agree with Commissioner Morris when I think this is the county would get the raw end of the deal, and the community would get the raw end of the deal on this one. And for those reasons, I cannot support it.
All right, we have a motion on the table. We have a second by Commissioner Strelick. Any further commentary to your motion, Commissioner Mast?
Just that I want to thank all of you from the community who carried yourselves in a very professional manner tonight. I thank you for your facts and your research. There's two things that I would like to say that might seem confusing to you. When we sit on this board, it's not about emotions, although your emotions are very important. We are guided by very strong, regulated land use, and what our comp plan says, and what our Unified Development Code says, and all those things. And so we have to factor all those issues, and sometimes you like us and sometimes you hate us. And I thank you for carrying yourselves in a professional manner tonight. I would strongly suggest, as just a friendly, if this property goes up for sale, you might want to purchase it as a community, just a suggestion. And I would continue to ask you to carry yourselves in a professional manner, whether you care for what the decisions are that come down or not. That's what makes us an incredible community.
Thank you, Commissioner Mast. To your second, Commissioner Strelick.
I would only add to what's already been said by Commissioner Mast and Commissioner Morris that there is a safety issue out there, and although people in the fire department can make agreements and that kind of thing, it doesn't change the fact. I think that's a real danger here, and that's another reason that I don't support this.
Any additional commentary? All right, I will comment before we call the question. I think, we have a pretty formalized, if you will, swap program in the county called transfer of development rights. There's places where we encourage swapping of things to create intended consequences. The applicant opened with a statement calling equal land for equal land. I think that's just a miscategorization of what's happening here. The only thing equal in it is about the relative size. And to state a measure that you're going to take these two parcels that have nothing built on it and then you're going to build something on it and it's better for the environment is kind of a stretch. And you don't see the evidence of that really coming out in the application itself as it relates to the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. So, however this vote falls, it's going to move forward to the county commission one way or the other. And I think falling on an argument of equal land for equal land doesn't hold up under the goals, objectives, and policies of our comprehensive plan. So with that, I will call the question. All those in favor of a motion to deny, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.